Agile workplace, it's a hot topic at the moment. There's no better time to be talking about this. And just as a forerunner to that, a little bit about my background, because it's if I'm talking about this, you need to know that I've got experience in doing that. So my background, I've worked corporate side, so I've worked for Vodafone and more recently at the Co-op in Manchester, looking at large transformation or cultural change programs, and more recently joined the sort of refurbishment and fit outside of the marketplace as the contracting side, working with Overbury and one other in the industry, looking at how the change that we do through fit out and refurbishment, the impact that has on people. No one likes change, but change can be for the better, and a new workplace is one of those. But how we do that, how we manage that, and it's a very people-centric role, what we're trying to do. So a little bit about my background. We'll move on to the webinar. We'll go through what we're going to talk about today. I think you've seen the invitation. We're going to talk about the essentials of the workplace. Really keen to look at what we can learn from the education sector. That's really interesting. Current offices, what makes them an efficient office? That's really key, and people will want to know about that. And also, what are we seeing in terms of trends, the future of the workplace? It's a really, really hot topic for us. What does that mean? Where are we going to get to? So we'll that's the rough agenda. We'll go through that. As I say, questions we'll try and answer as we go through, but depend on the size and length of my answers, which potentially could be quite lengthy. We'll come back at the sort of end of the webinar. Moving on then, as I say, the polls at the bottom, those that have responded, thank you. We're trying to understand how best to target what the appetite for this kind of webinar is, and the people who are interested in the webinar, their background. What is the position they're in? Are they working agilely? Why are people here? What is the interest? What do they really want to get out of the webinar? So those of you that have already responded, thank you. If you haven't responded, please have a look slightly down below, have a look at the polls, just give us your thoughts. There's a couple of polls there, and any questions you want to throw at me, we'll go through those as well. So let's start off the office. It's the rate of change has never been as great as it is today. It's exponential. The rate of change in the workplace will never be as slow as it is today. It's on an upward trajectory, and that hasn't really changed. Just as a quick overview, a background, you'll see some sort of a very simplistic views of offices and how they've changed over the years. A word of warning to everybody in the webinar, I am going to use some terms such as and these do cause alarm and panic amongst some people, but we are going to mention the words open plan, hot desking. So if you are slightly nervous around those terms, be prepared. They are coming up. But the office has changed from very simplistic office layout all the way through, my favourite there, when the Germans and efficient Germans got involved, the Bureau Landschaft model, onto the cube farm. And those that have been to America or worked in America or even seen programs in America around the workplace, you'll recognize the cube farm. Still very much came in around sort of 1980, still very much the forefront of American offices at the moment. Europe moved on slightly, and this is where I'm going to mention that word open plan, born out of really a desire to increase collaboration, but let's not lie, it was also a driver to consolidate space. Property is expensive. So open plan was seen at the time, 1994, we started moving into this era of a lot of desks. We're going to collaborate, it's going to be great. Unfortunately, that, as we now recognise, we found a lack of quiet space, concentration space. Introverts really struggle in open plan environments. Salespeople love it, introverts not so much. So the modern working environment has now moved to what we're calling a sort of smart working or activity-based working model. That really is a space, we'll go into a bit more detail, but it's a space where people have more choice about how and where and when they work. So that's a brief overview of how the office has changed. That's where we're at. We're at this activity-based model, if you like. And how does it all fit together? What does it mean? There are three things that underpin smart working, agile working, flexible working, whatever we're calling it. For the moment, we're going to call it activity-based working. That is the modern working environment. And that encompasses agile working and flexible working, which may sound a little bit counterintuitive, but if we look at activity, agility, agile working, that's really all about movement in and out of the workplace. So that's whether you're moving around in your own space or externally. You're able to move and you're agile in where you work. Flexible working is more to do, we see, with hours. So there's a lot of job sharing, condensed hours, working 4-day weeks, but doing the hours of 5. Being variable, your start times and your finish times, so that you're flexible in your hours. So flexible hours, agile movement, and those combined with the right workplace also kind of make smart working. That's where we see those all coming together to what we call activity-based working or smart working. Those two are basically the same things. It's when you've got the combination of agile working and flexible working. Now, hopefully that makes sense, and you can see on this slide here how it all fits together. The modern working environment and making activity-based working work properly, there's 3 key elements. The workspace has got to be right, so it's got to give you the choice and the variety of spaces. But you also need the technology to be able to move and use those spaces. And it's no good spending all that money on a workplace and that technology if you haven't got the culture that enables you to trust and empower your people to go and use those spaces. Like an old milking stool, 3-legged stool, one of those is missing, it's going to fall over. So companies can spend a fortune on their workplace, get great technology in there, but if the culture's not right, it's not going to work and you're not going to get the results out of it. So those 3 elements really combine to create what we call the nirvana, the activity-based or the smart working environment. And that's really where all those elements fit together and what we're trying to achieve, the modern workplace is trying to achieve. But has much changed in the last 100 years? Well, if we're honest, not really. The image there shows, I mean, it's going back a bit, slightly before my time, but things haven't really differed a great deal. Desks underpin everything we do. We go back to the QWERTY keyboard, which was invented in 1836, for example. Not since then has anyone challenged that and got, actually, there might be a better way to do that. The same with CC on your email. That stands for carbon copy, which was a term invented in 1806. We're still using that. We're still using that today. So we're very fearful of change, and the office has worked for so long. Why change it? Everyone needs a desk. Surely that's where we all do our best work. And we've kind of lived off that ever since. Those of you who use Word as a program, for example, I think when you open up Word, the first thing you see is an A4 size piece of paper on your screen, and then you start typing and the text will be really small. Why are we doing that? We don't really print that much anymore. The screen should be sort of the size of the text you're typing. If you need to print, then it should default to you can go into an A4 view. So we're kind of set in our ways that the paper and the way things we've always done things are the norm, and it's hard to change. Let's not beat around the bush. It's difficult to change, whether that be culture or anything else. I think autonomous vehicles is a good one at the moment, where there's a lot of talk about autonomous vehicles. Let's be honest, most of the new cars on the road at the moment are pretty much autonomous anyway. They drive themselves. But the first rule, for example, how much we dislike change in this country, the first rule we introduced in this country around autonomous vehicles was around movement of an autonomous vehicle. When an autonomous vehicle is moving, there must be one person in that vehicle. I don't know, let's call them the driver, say. So an autonomous vehicle has always got someone in it. It's not really autonomous anymore. There's always a driver involved in it. That's the first law that was implemented in this country. So that's a kind of understanding of how much we dislike change. The office hasn't really changed a great deal. Certainly from the 70s almost, there's been very little movement in the office. They're very, very similar to where we were and have been. And there is more pressure on that office environment now to change. And there are reasons for that. And we'll start talking about it. So as I say, things haven't changed as much as I like. There's a great shot of the American cube farm there. Now, moving on from that, why is there pressure on the workplace? Why are there things different from that? There's a number of factors. Generationally, we're now the workplace has got to cater for around 5 generations. We get a little bit hung up on generational X, Y, Z, millennial, baby boomers, all those kind of things. fundamentally people. We're all people, and we all have slightly different needs. That generational, yes, there's some key trends that we can allocate to those generational boundaries, but in our experience, those of the elder generations have been through and seen a lot more change than younger generations, and actually find it easier to adapt to change than younger generations. It's not the case in all generations, and that's broad brush. Bottom line is there's a lot of different people out there with a lot of different needs. And from education, when we think back to how we were educated, we look at the time we were in nursery, through school and university, all have been prevalent in pushing movement. In nursery, the space is divided up into a reading corner, an art area, a play area. We now even have sleeping areas in nurseries. I think that's whether teachers can just have a break, or actually kids benefit from having a power nap, as they do in the workplace in Japan now, which is quite prevalent. So nursery, we define areas to go, where people go, where there's a task associated with that. So the reading corner, kids know from a very early age, that's where I need to go and read. It's probably a quieter area. The art area, totally different. That's prepared for mess, noise, and all kinds of things going on. But we go forward there into school, exactly the same premise. Worst day of school was the first day when you got your new timetable, especially as being new to that school. You then had to figure out what all these numbers and letters meant about which room you're in and where the hell that was on your campus. Science blocks with the little gas taps for your chemistry lessons, where you blew stuff up. That was in a particular area. That's where you went to do science. Music block, normally out of the way and soundproofed. College, sports area, gym, again, separate area. We used to go into certain places to do certain topics and certain tasks. And again, that follows on through university with the library, lecture theatres, art studios, labs, student union, bar. Spend a bit too much time in the latter two, but we're used to going where we need to go for a certain task. If we need to go and learn something, it's into the lecture theatre. If we need to study or quiet time, it's into the library. We then leave university and we come into the workplace. And day one, your boss says to you, here's your desk. You start at 9, you finish at 5, and you're going to be really, really productive. And that's slightly counterintuitive to everything we've just learned through our formative educational years. So that one-size approach, that one-size-fits-all approach, isn't really right in terms of progressing. We're used to moving. We're used to being agile and going to where we need to go to in the workplace. Yet we come into the workplace, sit at our desk, and wonder why productivity is taking a drop. So there's also pressure now from graduates leaving university. The expectation in terms of the standard of fit out and environment that they're working in has been pushed greatly by universities. Through the downtime, universities at the time, tuition fees had just been reintroduced. So universities were chasing graduates. How are we going to attract the best people, the best students? How are we going to attract that tuition fee paying student? And they did that by creating great working learning environments. And there was a competition between universities who could have the best learning environment to attract the best people. That's had a knock-on effect to the workplace. These graduates are now leaving that great environment and coming into the workplace and seeing working environments and going, that's not for me, thanks very much. And there's a real challenge coming up with the war for talent. Unemployment is lower than it ever has been and continuing to drop. That adds real pressure to attract new staff to a business, particularly out of city centre locations. Those that have moved to out of city centre campuses are now finding it quite tough to attract people to those campuses. And the workplace has a real impact on that, the first impression, the working environment that people are expected to work in. Their expectations have been raised, I think is what we can say. And business needs to catch up. So the education sector has put real pressure on the commercial sector to up its game, as the educational sector did. And in fact, if we look at the educational sector and the fit out of a university now, from our experience, you take lecture theatres out, and the commercial sector and the education sector, high end, look very, very similar. We're not saying education is Google, but there's a mix of environments. There's a quality, give it a choice, a variety for people to choose where, when, and how they work and how they do their best work, where they perform best. That's the expectation that's now coming into the commercial world. So there's a real challenge for people to pick that up and run with it. Do we even need desks? Well, yes, we do. We're not getting away from that. the frightening stats on the right there, that 70% of staff have no choice where and when they work. That's the biggest challenge in the UK at the moment towards productivity. That's a huge figure. There's some in the polls already mentioned culture being a real stumbling block for agile working and this change to a more flexible approach to work. 46% of staff fail within 18 months due to a poor cultural fit. I can only see that figure increasing, whereas culture from younger generations and expectations of the workplace are increasing, and the workplace not catching up or not changing or adapting to the modern environment that it needs to be. So do we need desks? Yes, there's always going to be a place for a desk. We need desks, it's fundamental. You only have to look at Apple, who've just built a new headquarters in California, large donut building, very nice, spent millions on it. First thing they've done is fill a lot of it with desks. Desks are fundamental. We're always going to have a place for desks. We just don't need as many as we think we do, I think, is the real challenge. So what are the essential ingredients for an office? Well, there's many, and sadly there's no one-size-fits-all approach to this. So those that were looking for the nirvana and something to take away to say, here's the answer, I've got the key, unfortunately I can't provide that. But what I can say is that there isn't a one-size-fits approach, and it's really understanding you as a business, your culture, where you're trying to get to, what are you trying to do, your people. I think one of the key things that we come across businesses that are keen, they want to refurbish, they think it's going to help attract staff, but they fail to ask their people as to what's wrong with the current space, what's right with the current space, what do we need to make sure we keep and maintain, as well as what would we like, what can we do, how far can we push it, are we flexible in our approach? We find there's a real desire to move to a more flexible approach from staff, but management have a real challenge in adapting, and it is a tough challenge to adapt to a more agile approach to management. No longer, we're moving into an era where we're now focusing on output rather than presenteeism. There, I've said it, that word that doesn't exist, but we all use. If I can see you, therefore you're working. Actually, if I can't see you, you're not working. That goes on a lot. Some of that is down to how we were managed as people. People tend to manage in the way they were managed when they were through their formative years and part of their early careers. So we're now at that point where actually there's a real shift. It doesn't really matter where, when, and how people work, as long as they get their work done. And that is a massive cultural shift for management, which is really difficult and needs different tools to manage people in that way. Suddenly managing by output rather than just seeing them sat in front of you can be a real challenge. And we can help people through that, but they're fundamentally part of this move to the more flexible approach. So the key things really are understanding who you are as a business. What is it you're trying to do? Who are you? What do you want your office to do for you? Is it to attract staff? Is it to retain staff? Is it to continue increasing productivity? Those kind of things are key. And really understanding that DNA of you as a business is fundamental, and the first part of what we try and uncover as Overbury before we put pen to paper and do any kind of design work. We'll be focusing on you as a client. Who are you? What do you do? Where are you going? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to achieve? Almost to try and challenge your brief a little. From there, we then engage with people. People who use the space on a day-to-day basis are essential in understanding what you need your space to do and how it can be improved. From an engagement point of view as well, critical that they're involved right from the off. So those things are really, really key for us. It's understanding where you're at, where you're trying to get to, and where your people are in this process. They need to be engaged and need to be involved to make any kind of change work properly. The end goal, as it's not rocket science, this one, but happy workers are 11% more productive. It kind of makes common sense, really, that if you get the right environment and you trust and empower people to do their work, then they're going to be happier. Happy people are more productive. Warwick University have managed to put a paper on that and prove that, which is probably something we could all kind of guess and knew that would be the case. So offices, they should inspire us and excite us. Absolutely. They need to provide for everybody. And as I said before, there's no, they've got to work harder than they ever have done before for the types of spaces that are being used. Technology is important. At the moment, we go to workplaces and it's probably the same for you as well. You've got better technology at home than you have in your workplace. That's a real challenge for business to overcome, and get up to speed with the right technology. The pressure on the workplace, we've got, those of you who've got kids, sort of teenagers, will know that if you've ever spoken to one of your kids about email, they haven't got a clue what it is. They don't use it. So again, that's a real challenge about coming into the office of the future, the kind of pressure that's going to put on work. Imagine going to work and not having email, and using other forms of communication instead. A real challenge for us that we've got to absorb. But it should inspire us and it should excite us. That's what it needs to do. Going through any kind of refurbishment or fit out is a great time to address culture, because when people see and feel things are different, they'll absorb culture slightly differently. We know of many companies at the moment in Birmingham, for example, in the banking industry. There's a prominent player in the banking industry that are moving in to the centre of the financial district in Birmingham. They're already recruiting staff and taking staff from some of the existing employers in the area 12 months before their building is actually fitted out and ready, on the premise that they will create a great working environment. We'll provide the right environment, come and work with us. And they're teeing up, and people are leaving 12 months before the space is even ready, because of the desire to work in a great working environment. That draw is quite key. Here in Manchester, we've also had interactions with large members of the online retail portfolio, growing rapidly, trying to recruit from other areas, from competitors. And we're finding it's not so much about salary anymore. One in particular here in Manchester, someone walked out of an interview, believe it or not, based on the standards of accommodation they walked to as part of their meeting, their interview process. Literally said, if that's the standard of accommodation you want me to work in, I'm not interested, thanks. So salary is becoming less and less important, but flexibility and office environment is becoming more and more important. So from a retention and attraction point of view, it's massively key to get this right. Just moving on, as time is whipping by, and I want to get through some of your questions if we can at the end. What we're finding to date. So what have we covered? Probably around 660,000 square foot of office space we've looked at in 2018. We're finding the key figure there for me is the 57% average desk utilization. So 43% of desks are not being used at any one time, yet we're heating, lighting, powering, cooling those, but we're not using the space. Inefficient use of space. There's a cost associated to that. I think outside of London, the average desk costs around £6,000 a year to heat, light, power, and cool, and rent and lease. So £7.2 million worth of unused space or underutilized space that we've uncovered this year. Meeting rooms there, that's really going to surprise people. 38% perception everywhere we go is that meeting rooms are really packed, really busy. In actual fact, they're only busy at really 11 and 2 when they are packed. Outside of that, there's less. And there's more capacity in the meeting room suite. Meeting room booking systems are a very great example on how to sort of counteract that. And also on there, 55% of our of when we're awake, we're spent in the office, which is an enormous figure. So if we have got a workplace, it needs to be somewhere that's going to motivate, inspire, and enable us to be productive as best as possible. I think it's worth also just mentioning well-being. We've done quite a few seminars ourselves on well-being. There's a lot of thought. Is it just a trend? Is it one of those buzzwords that come up now and again in the industry? Actually, no, well-being is off the back of what we've just been talking about, making an agile, modern office. Well-being is right at the forefront of that. So in terms of making sure, if you want happy people, if they're healthy as well, healthy, happy people are going to be productive. So if you've got the right environment, and it also provides, from a well-being point of view, great natural light, great water quality, great air quality, biophilia. Sorry, wrong way. Like a plant behind me there. Those kind of things are key to creating a healthy environment. And if you've got a healthy environment and providing a working culture that enables people to be productive and happy, then you're ticking a lot of boxes and you're creating a productive working environment, which is what everybody wants. Some key stats here that have come out of research recently. Those with an outside view, for example, 10 to 25% better mental function, which is phenomenal, really. And most offices we go to, they're normally on the outside, they're surrounded by all the personal offices and all of the staff in the middle. And those in the personal offices are normally in meetings most of the time. So all of that natural light is being wasted a lot of the time. But actually, the impact it can have on everybody is huge, and create much better, a much more productive environment for everyone. So the impact on daylight, and as I said, the increase 23% increased productivity just from better lighting. The modern lighting, LED lighting or natural daylight lighting, technologies move this on leaps and bounds to provide a better environment and a more productive environment. The well-being is really important to what we're doing, and a lot of the work we do is designing on the basis of well-being, or the fundamental principles of well-being, without spending money of going through the checklist and chasing an accreditation. So really, really important if we are looking at workplace, those two combine. So well-being as well as smart agile workplace. Two key words I'm going to come back to. You pay staff a lot of money to do a job. Let's trust them and empower them to do that, and give them the office environment where they can choose how to be as productive as possible. I think that's fundamental. Along with retention and attraction, these are the four biggest sort of words we're talking about with clients at the moment, trying to implement through design and our fit out work. But these are really fundamental to the culture, and how we use refurbishment to manage that culture, where trust and empowerment become key words and key topics. And it's not just talked about, it is fundamentally absorbed, where we do now trust our staff to go and work in a productive way, and we give them the environment to be able to do that. Key words to take away from today, I think. Comes back to choice. We're talking about choice. Choice. At the moment, the majority of workplaces that we see, the working environment has two work settings: your desk and a meeting room, and that's it. When in actual fact, we all work in many, many different ways. So having an informal breakout space, quiet space, private space for a private phone call, somewhere introverts can go, extroverts want to sit in the middle of the office and shout about. Let's give people 8, 9, 10 different work settings. And one of those work settings is working from home. And I will just touch on working from home as we come to the end. Working from home is not the answer. Agile working does not mean working from home. Working from home is a work setting. It's a choice in your office place. It can be your informal sofa, your desk, a meeting room, or working from home. It's not the solution. It's not going to solve everyone's problem. And it's not something we would ever force. It works for some people. It doesn't work for others. But again, enabling people to use that as a choice is a good thing. Some people won't want to work from home. Some people want to work in, and some people won't want to work on a sofa with a coffee. But giving people the choice just treats them with that little bit of trust and empowerment to do their best work. Now, those that do work from home, there's a stigma attached to it, which we're rapidly trying to destroy, because those that work from home are 43% more productive, and that's statistical proof. They don't get the distractions that you do in an average office. I think on average, every 9 minutes, there's a distraction in the office, and it takes about 12 minutes for you to get back to the state that you were. So you're ever in a decreasing spiral of distraction, whereas at home, you don't get that. So as I say, it's not the answer. It's a work setting. It's right for some, it's not right for others. But giving people that choice means you get the best out of those that do want to use it. Work is no longer a destination. The office has got to be a place where people want to go, where they want to go and do their best work. We will always need an office. We will always need a hub, a space that we call home. And even when we plan an office, instead of defining lines on a plan, we'll have neighborhoods or home zones where people can go. But it's all about giving people the right choice, the right culture, the right technology. That's how you get a high-performing office. And that's really what Agile smart working is really trying to drive to create. So that's the end of the webinar. I'm just going to look down, so bear with me while I look at a couple of questions that have come in. Ian, demountable offices. Interesting question. So Ian says, what are my thoughts around demountable offices? I think the furniture industry, Ian, is probably coming into its most significant period. I think long gone are the days of creating walls. The office environment of the future has got to be flexible, agile. It's got to move and flex with the times. Things are going to change. So having fixed partitions and fixed settings isn't really going to work for an office of the future. I think in terms of desks and anything we have in the office place has got to be movable. So I think furniture needs a bit more of a focus from us as an industry, from the furniture industry to promote, and also from clients to understand the importance of furniture. So I think demountable offices, it's part of the solution. I think that furniture itself and some of the move towards more acoustic bound properties that can be moved, anything that can be moved, I see as having a future in the office. So I hope that answers some of your questions, Ian. In short term, yes, I think it's a good thing, and I think they are a good thing. Compressed hours, Louise. Working a 4-day week. So we've touched on agile working and flexible working and the slight differences. So working a 4-day week is this back to the flexible working element. So it's hours. So compressed working hours, a 4-day week, we're seeing that more and more popular. There is such a blurred boundary now between work and home life. A lot of the furniture that we've just been talking about is more residential basis. It's a lot more softer in terms of its finish and its appearance, a lot more natural product. So natural finishes such as the wood that we're now seeing commonplace to replicate what's happening in the residential sector. So that blur needs to accommodate for people's hours. We're going to get to a point very shortly where people are going to come into the workplace expecting to be able to be flexible in terms of their working hours, compressed hours, job share. Going down to a 4-day week, I think, would be fantastic. Just through the utilization studies, we see the number of people that actually aren't in an office on Friday is quite alarming. So actually, if everyone could work compressed hours to a 4-day week, would we lose productivity? I don't think we would, but that's my own personal view. So compressed hours, yes. I think it all comes into that agility. If you've got the right culture and the right workplace that enables you to use compressed hours or job sharing, or however you want to flex your hours, start late, start early, then I think is a good thing. And I think we will see more and more of that, particularly from those generations that are now entering the workplace. Their expectations around the workplace are going to be very, very different to the standard 9 to 5. They'll want to be starting at 9, but then I'll finish at 12 for 3 hours, or I'll go and do a bit of shopping, do my own thing, pick up the kids at 3, and then I'll come back into the office later, but I'll be working till 9. The office needs to accommodate that. And I think that's one thing that from a commercial side of things, flexible working has got to be embraced a little bit more in terms of how that can be approached. We know there are core hours for a business, but there's got to be slightly more than we can do from that. Just seeing it's more coming in, so apologies if I don't get through them all in the time. We'll come back to everybody that has left a question. I work in an office where every professor has a contractual entitlement to an office. Help. Richard, that's a great comment, and it's not just in universities. I've seen that where engineering companies where everyone has been given an office. Now these offices might be the size of a postage stamp, but the status and the hierarchy of having your own office is a huge cultural leap from. So I'll be interested to have a conversation with you offline, Richard, about how we can sort of help you through that, because offices, as we see, I think they're around about a 44% utilization figure. They take a large amount of space, but if they're not being used efficiently, that's a big cost that could be affecting you as a university. And you need to learn from the students. I think that's a really, really prudent comment. So yeah, Richard, perhaps we'll catch up after this to go through that in a bit more detail. Simon, too noisy. Is this open plan, or you have lots of stuff to store and you need to hold confidential conversations? These are comments that we see coming back quite a lot when we're talking about activity-based working. This is where we need to make sure that the technology is right. So actually, if you've got lots of stuff to store in paper, can it be scanned in? What are your retention periods? Does it need to be stored on-site, off-site, or long-term deep storage? In terms of what you need to store, that's, I can't answer for you there. We need to store, but activity-based working is about providing you with a choice in your locale of lots of different work settings. So if you're in a department such as HR where you have a lot of confidential conversations, then we make sure there's a lot of quiet booths or drop-in areas where you can go to have those conversations. Slightly different to a call center, where they are more desk-based, and they'll need two-man booths where they have one-to-ones more regularly, or a town hall space where they all get together in the morning to talk about things. So I don't think I think agile working or activity-based working can work for the majority of people, but without knowing specifics, we can't give you full detail. More than happy to have a conversation with you about that over a coffee, where you see the challenges for you in particular around activity-based working. Joe, do I believe agile working can have different definitions and meaning depending on user? Much like being, I do, Joe. I think, like we said, one size doesn't fit all. We've worked with some companies who initially said, don't worry, it's all great. We're going to agile working. We're going to 7 to 10 right across our entire working environment. And that's bang alarm bells for me, because, like I said, one size doesn't fit all. They had a 150 person admin department that really would struggle on an 8 to 10 ratio. So to go to a 7 to 10 ratio, it just wasn't going to work for them. And we had to push back and challenge that and say, no, we need to understand you, how you work and what you do, before we can then give you their different definition, if you like. So absolutely, agile working or smart way or activity-based working will differ for every client depending on your needs and how you and your business and what you're doing. Alex, do you think we'll see more shift working for office-based jobs to increase space utilization? I do, Alex. I think we're coming to a point where work is all about output now and not necessarily hours. And I agree there are going to be some businesses that have core hours that need to do things at certain times, but also business needs to understand that certain people do things at different times. Our own company, for example, we have a lot of designers and creative people that tend to work, shall we say, after a gallon of coffee around sort of 9, 10 o'clock they'll start, but they'll be the ones in the office till about 8, 9 o'clock at night. Whereas me, I'm in at sort of 6 in the morning. And the reason this webinar is in the morning, because by 3 o'clock, I've crashed and my productivity is really, really low. So I do think shift working and perhaps just massaging that flexible working element to whether it's shift or just stretching the boundaries of how and when work is done, I think, more than anything, will change. So yes, I do agree with you, Alex. I think that is something that will impact business as we're going forward. Sue's just come in with a quick one. We'll probably make this the last one because we're coming up to time. So what impact does agile working have on office density? That's a good question, Sue. It doesn't necessarily need to have any impact on office density. At the moment, the figures we've just gone through, standard office, 1-to-1 desk ratio, everyone has their own desks. We're kind of seeing that desks are only being used about 55, 57% of the time, I think it was. So there's a lot of desks there that aren't being used. I think in an ideal world, what we would say is those desks that aren't being used, let's take those out and put in different work settings to give you a little bit more choice on where you do work. So it doesn't necessarily need to change office density. It's just using the space you've got in a different way to provide a more productive working environment. I hope that makes sense. So that would be in the case of, like I said, HR, we'd have more quiet areas, more acoustic baffling, slightly more areas where they can drop in and have one-to-one or quiet conversations. Marketing might need a brainstorming, a huge collaboration space where they can write on the walls and get stuff pinned up and visually see stuff. It's creating the right work settings for those teams. And basically the office becomes one big shared space. We need to start thinking of the office instead of my desk, my pedestal, this is our team's meeting room. Actually, it's a shared space for everybody. We need to learn to share in our office space. That's how you'll get a more efficient working environment, but it doesn't necessarily have to impact density. There is obviously, of course, the challenge where you can say, well, if we don't need that many desks, we can actually consolidate our space and we don't need all that space. We can reduce our costs. That would increase your density. I'm not sure that's the best route to go for, but again, depends on individual circumstances. But It doesn't have to. I'd rather see the space used in a more effectively way, giving people more choice, than I would just making it smaller and increasing density. I hope that's answered some of the questions. We'll go through it. If there's any I've missed, I'm sorry about that. I'm just looking through. There's some good stuff about meeting rooms and booking systems. Claire, I'll probably come back to you after this, unfortunately. And Chris, the midweek mountain. You see the midweek mountain. We tend to see a trend from Monday all the way down to Friday. But I'll come back to you on that offline as well. So thanks very much for answering the question. I appreciate all the feedback. Guys, we're going to leave it there. So thanks for all those that have left a question. Those that have an answer, we'll come back to you. Thanks for updating the polls. That's really good feedback for us and where we can target. There will be a follow-up sort of questionnaire, just a survey, just to ask how you think things have gone, whether there's things we need to change slightly. And we'd also like your feedback on how this went and where you think or what the topics should be going forward. We'd really like to use this as a regular forum to sort of share our knowledge and finding and answer those questions you've got. So if you could send any feedback through when that comes through to you, that would be fantastic. But I'll leave it there. If there's anything, please feel free to contact me directly. If you haven't got my details, you'll find me on LinkedIn. I'm dead easy to find. I'm more than happy to come and have a chat over a coffee with you, or a bit of cake, or maybe even both. But thanks very much for your time, guys, and we'll leave it there.